We often hear things like, well, there's no developers in Bitcoin, there's no innovation happening in Bitcoin. And so in today's video, we are going to debunk that myth by taking a look at two areas where there is a ton of momentum. One is, of course, the Lightning Network, and the other, believe it or not, is DeFi on Bitcoin. Let's jump in. Welcome back to another video. My name is Ian Major. I'm an entrepreneur, Bitcoin pleb, and all-around raging capitalist. And I thought it would be interesting to take a quick survey of two areas that are certainly near and dear to me and a lot of you watching, and that is the Lightning Network and DeFi on Bitcoin. And I know there's a lot of stigma around that second one in particular, but today we're going to break down some of the really interesting projects and development happening in both of those spheres that are rapidly taking Bitcoin from being not just this sort of store of value and immutable settlement network, but also to a viable medium of exchange and even the basis for a new financial system, which was always the goal, right? So you're not going to want to miss a thing. For those returning to the channel, welcome back, my friends, as always. It is a pleasure to have you. And for those new to the channel, I welcome you as well. If you like this type of content, I invite you to consider subscribing and join us in our growing merry gang in cyberspace. I cover all manner of Bitcoin-related content, including a whole slew of tutorials on how to acquire Bitcoin, secure it, privacy best practices, running your own node, mining, and emerging Bitcoin-based technology such as today's video. You want it, I cover it. That is how this works. But with all that out of the way, though, let's jump in first and cover the Lightning Network. So as I've covered in recent videos, the Lightning Network has seen pretty extraordinary growth in terms of its capacity, i.e. the amount of Bitcoin locked up in the sea of multi-sigs that make up the Lightning Network. And we've also continued to see capital pour in at an accelerating rate, companies building in and on Lightning, and all of this is amidst the bowels of the bear market. So I always think that is a pretty strong signal to see. We saw the announcement of wolf in sheep's clothing. So this is the Lightning Accelerator that Ross Stevens and Kelly Brewster are heading up. And of course, this is part of the kind of portfolio that NYDIG is a part of within Stone Ridge Asset Management. You also have other Bitcoin sort of studios. So DraperX Bitcoin Studio that is focusing and leaning more into Lightning. We were actually thrilled to be accepted into the second ever cohort of DraperX Bitcoin Studio. So I could not be more thrilled about that. That is my day job, for those of you wondering. I make these videos very much as sort of a side hobby where I have spare time. But if you want to follow our journey, you can find us at Trubit_tech on Twitter. But super pumped there. So I can speak from sort of personal experience, having been close to some of these different things. And I can tell you that just the pace and breadth of different ideas being developed is insane. I mean, this ranges from different usability things related to running Lightning infrastructure, such as node management, node performance. I mean, wallets. I feel like there's a new wallet almost every day. Now, at some point, you probably don't need all of those, but there continue to be really interesting, new pieces, new features. You're going to see Taro wallets of different flavors coming out. Of course, there's the whole kind of podcasting trend and the value for value movement, being able to stream sats for entertainment or content that you're consuming. There's Synoda, which is looking to disrupt energy pricing and sort of energy monetary flows, money that keeps up with the flow of energy. The company founder did a really interesting session with Preston Pish on his podcast recently. But I thought it would also be fun to spotlight some of the really interesting activity that is happening currently in the Legends of Lightning sort of tournament, hackathon, whatever you want to call it. This is, by my count, the largest in terms of participants as well as kind of monetary prize incentive. And so let's jump in and take a quick look at some of this. This is coordinated through Bolt Fund, has a number of different sponsors and collaborators that are helping make this happen. And what's notable about this is a few things. As I mentioned, the prizes, so the grand champion will get a whole Bitcoin. That is bananas. You then have these two tracks, the global adoption track, and then a track for building for Africa. There's first, second, third within each of the tracks, and then a prize for best design as well. And then two runners up will get half a Bitcoin each, and the grand champion will get a whole Bitcoin. So that is freaking awesome. And as you will see, the numbers here are pretty amazing. There's 234 makers and 44 projects that have been entered into the tournament. If we click in this, we can get a flavor of some of what's here. You've got things like the Arcade, which is a location-based social app with a 3D map. So think Pokemon Go for real-world commerce, powered by Lightning and Nostr. That is super cool. There's a lot of really cool stuff happening with that. You've got LNVPN, so a privacy-focused VPN provider that accepts Lightning payments. You've got shopping and commerce apps like Welcome to Bitcoin. So getting your pre-coiner friend to pay for something with Bitcoin is now as easy as handing them a QR code. And so this is a huge theme. You're seeing all sorts of different wallets attempt to make it unbelievably easy for no or pre-coiners to interact with Bitcoin. In fact, we have an entry ourselves, partnership with another company using app clips. This is super cool, guys. I'm not going to give this away, but you should check this out and stay tuned for more because I think this is going to be a game changer. We have LNDG, which is basically a GUI that helps give all sorts of helpful metrics and help with automation of managing your Lightning node. Very, very cool stuff there and much needed. LN contracts. So taking a more business-to-business lens in enabling Lightning to be suitable for business-to-business transactions. We've got finance projects. So Agriment is a kind of micro banking service that uses a combination of cheap hardware wallets, Fedimint, Lightning, all sorts of cool stuff. You've got Zero Login Mobile, which aims to bring the LNURL auth function to different applications, so allowing you to log in with some sort of public key as opposed to your username and password, right? That is a huge trend that we're seeing as well. Stable sats on Collider. So this is a Lightning native derivatives exchange. Collider is working with Galoy to push stable sats, which is a really interesting concept. I could probably do a whole separate video on. Sats to data. So this is a very simple way to turn sats into mobile data and airtime, also very good for privacy. You've got Bit Payroll, so payroll management using Bitcoin. This is on-chain, so it doesn't all have to be Lightning. And the list goes on. I'm sure I missed a lot of highlights in that, but you get the point. So pretty incredible stuff. I think there are a lot of critics who sort of rightly said, well, the Lightning Network was talked about so long ago and it took so long to sort of get here. But those who persist in that thinking are totally missing what's happening on the ground. I can tell you firsthand, Lightning Network is an absolute game changer. And when coupled with Taro now, I really think it's just game over. Good luck to all the critics and haters out there. But all that excitement does not happen without some growing pains. We saw yet another incident from the notorious Barack, who is once again up to no good. So as a reminder, he first did the 998 of 999 tap script multi-sig, and then this most recent issue was a valid but non-standard transaction, which basically caused nodes running BTCD. So again, this is an alternative to Bitcoin Core, but that caused BTCD to reject valid incoming blocks and created a corresponding glitch with LND nodes that use BTCD as the sort of backend. And so all of that was patched relatively quickly, but it does go to show you that with innovation comes growing pains, and there is a big trade-off to that, right? Because people are very used to thinking of Bitcoin, especially kind of mainnet, as being this relatively ossified, not quite yet ossified, but this, very sort of stable thing. And so we do have to be aware of that. We do have to be cognizant of that and be aware of the risks there as well. But net, still very, very exciting stuff. With that, let's switch gears and talk about DeFi. All right, so I think DeFi, the term, right, decentralized finance, sounds legit enough, but I think it has been quite besmirched by all the sort of scam projects and dinos, i.e. decentralized in name only, that we've seen in other blockchain ecosystems. And so the whole term has, I think, been quite bastardized in that regard. We have to recognize that if we truly want to reinvent the financial system with Bitcoin at the center of all of it, this is a necessity, right? You have to enable borrowing and lending. You have to enable these basic financial primitives that make up any economy with any level of complexity, right? And while there are many of us whose primary use case at this point is sort of hodling Bitcoin or maybe spending it, there are so many other pieces to the puzzle, right? Bitcoin as pristine collateral to borrow against, creating new tokenized assets, whether that's with RGB or Taro or Liquid or some of the new stuff we'll talk about today. You simply need all of those pieces if the goal is truly hyper-Bitcoinization. So that's something that I think a lot of people in the community who maybe don't have more of a finance background fail to understand. But at the same time, it's very, very good that all of that additional complexity is not natively enabled on the base protocol using native Bitcoin script. It is good that that is limited because any complex system has to evolve in layers. That is just how things work. In fact, we see this great quote from John Gall, which is absolutely spot on. A complex system that works is invariably found to have evolved from a simple system that worked. The inverse proposition also appears to be true. A complex system designed from scratch never works and cannot be made to work. You have to start over beginning with a working, simple system. And this is why we've seen with systems like Solana that go down all the time, or even Ethereum, which is still sort of reinventing itself while running at full speed, or BNB, which had to pause the other day, right? Like this is why that happens. And so you want specialization of layers. You want each layer to have a job, and you don't want a particular layer to have to do more than it has to. And so what that might look like is this example. This comes from a pretty good report that I will be referencing from Insight DeFi. I'm not really too familiar. I think they're based in Liechtenstein, but it is quite a good report. But this diagram shows an example using an analogy of like a computer system, right? So you have the base layer. That is the Bitcoin public blockchain. This is your immutable settlement layer for value exchange. And then on top of that, you have what they call an infrastructure layer. So this could be side chains. It could be layer 2. Sort of protocols like the Lightning Network. We're going to be focusing primarily on sidechains for today, and then so on and so forth, right? You have kind of financial primitives built into the, this kind of operating system idea. You have specific decentralized applications, and then you ultimately have the kind of wallets or users themselves at the very top. And so make no mistake, DeFi on Bitcoin is not only good for the broader Bitcoin economy and driving hyper-Bitcoinization. In fact, it's a necessary ingredient for that, but it is also inevitable because of the traits of Bitcoin that make it so unique, right? Its immutable monetary cap, its level of censorship resistance, its level of security, right? These are things that good luck replicating that. And in fact, we see that evidenced by the fact that you could argue in a weird way that Ethereum is actually the biggest sidechain of Bitcoin because it has by far the most Bitcoin locked up in wrapped forms through bridges. And so this will continue, right? Bitcoin as a pristine collateral asset will sort of continue to exist in bridged form in all sorts of other blockchain ecosystems. Now, there are a ton of trade-offs with that. You're not really inheriting the security properties that you would get in a different sidechain that is fundamentally connected to Bitcoin, such as RSK or Rootstock, which is what Sovryn uses. But it is interesting to see, and I do think that will continue. But what I basically want to do with the rest of this section is to kind of dance through some of the key sidechain or related, we're going to kind of use that term a little bit loosely, but I'm going to dance through a couple of the different efforts that I think are really interesting and that are highlighted in this report. And I'm going to stay very, very high level in this video. I've actually done deep dives on a number of these in past videos, so I would encourage you to check out the associated playlist on my channel. This can also be an opportunity for you to weigh in and chime in the comments down below with anything you'd like to see more detail on. I'll highlight where I kind of am planning on doing future videos, but would love to hear your input and feedback to guide that prioritization. So first up that's covered is RSK, or the Rootstock sidechain. This is a merge mined sidechain to Bitcoin. I have done a whole video on Sovryn, which is built on RSK. I would invite you to check that out if you are so interested. I really like the trade-offs that RSK has gone with. It did start as a federated model and still has some minor elements of that, but we are moving towards a more permissionless model of pegging out. That's like always the key challenge, right? You can peg Bitcoin in, which basically means locking it up in a multi-sig address, but then how do you peg that out in a permissionless way, i.e. in a way in which you're not sort of asking this kind of federation of members for permission to, withdraw your Bitcoin after you extinguish the RBTC, or the sort of Bitcoin derivative that is created and minted when you lock it up in the first place. So all in all, I really do like RSK, and I like what the Sovryn team is doing. They recently announced their Zero protocol, which allows you to borrow against your Bitcoin at 0%. You did not hear that incorrectly. So that is a really interesting proposition. Now, don't get too excited. What that basically means is you can borrow a kind of stable coin-like asset, and then you'd have to do a series of exchanges and trades in order to get it to like actual fiat. But that is a really interesting one, and you may have seen some of the marketing that's now being put behind it. I definitely plan to do a video on this in the near future, because I think the ability to borrow against your Bitcoin is a really important thing, particularly for people who want to be on a full sort of personal Bitcoin standard. That is a really important tool to have in your toolkit. Now, the next sidechain, of course, is Liquid. Folks will associate this with Blockstream, who helped develop this. It is built on the Elements platform. I think it is more federated than Rootstock, so that is one of the big kind of trade-offs of these different models. But at the same time, there are some pretty interesting benefits. I did a whole video on Liquid as well, so again, check that out if you're curious. There definitely are privacy benefits, and despite its sort of low usage, there actually is a lot of stuff that's being built to support it and or be compatible with it. As you can see, I mean, this ecosystem is certainly not nothing, right? When you think about these different categories and components. Also keep in mind the El Salvador Bitcoin bond is issued on Liquid, which has been delayed for a lot of different reasons, but nonetheless, that is really interesting financial innovation that is being built on Liquid. There's also Fuji Money, which is a non-custodial lending platform offering Bitcoin-backed stablecoins. So I think a lot of people kind of realize that, like, hey, there's a lot of stuff actually here that we already sort of have, but it maybe hasn't been communicated that well or marketed that well. And so I have observed a more kind of concerted effort to do some of that, and I think rightly so, because there really is a lot of interesting stuff there. Next one highlighted is Stacks. Now, this is a controversial one given that it is its own standalone layer 1 blockchain and has its standalone gas token, sort of Stacks token. But I do still think there's some interesting innovation happening there. I've done videos on Stacks in the past as well. Stacks has the ability to read Bitcoin state, which is very interesting. The really big unlock would be able to write onto Bitcoin, right? Not just read its state, but to write transactions to Bitcoin using smart contracts on Stacks. That would unlock a lot of really cool stuff, and it does seem like they are reasonably close to that. I think my main pushback on this is that there has been a lot of talk about more tightly integrating with Bitcoin, right? Obfuscating the Stacks gas token more, allowing you to, for example, pay gas fees with sats. That's been talked for quite a long time, and I'm just not totally convinced that it's being prioritized, but it remains to be seen because there are a lot of really cool efforts going on. There's something called Zest Protocol, which is going after kind of institutional borrowing, which a lot of us watching this, really have no care at all about. But again, to develop these deep, liquid Bitcoin financial capital markets, you have to have these different capabilities and players. So it'll be interesting to see whether Stacks can truly live up to its promise of more tightly integrating with Bitcoin and kind of pushing the Stacks gas token more to the background. And then finally, there is a new sidechain effort, sidechain-ish, I guess, called Sequentia, which is being developed. It's focused on asset tokenization, and it works without a peg-in process. It retains the same UTX model that Bitcoin has as opposed to an account-based model. So it's actually taking a pretty interesting approach that is different from all the different things we have discussed thus far. I will probably do an in-depth video on this in the future because there is a lot to pick apart here. And so there you have it. Those, I think, are the really big kind of main efforts with a couple examples of projects that are being built and developed. And again, I think the needle really is moving on this theme as a whole, and it'll be really interesting to see what happens. With all that, let's go ahead and conclude today's video. All right, so we took a closer look today at some of the development happening within the Lightning Network and within this topic of DeFi on Bitcoin. Anyone who says there aren't developers furiously working in these spaces is not paying attention at all. I can speak to that being on the front line. We feel like we have a fire under our ass every day because people are pushing the envelope, and it is really cool to see. But I'm curious to hear, what are your thoughts? Are there efforts or projects that were not covered that you're really interested in? Are there related topics you'd like to see future videos on? Let me know in the comments down below. But I hope you found this valuable and insightful. If you did, you already know what to do. Give this video a like. Use the share feature underneath this video. That really does help get this to more individuals. And I think it's important, right? Even if you're going to use none of these additional capabilities or tools, it's important to have the broader story in mind. But share this out. Let me know what you think. And if you were so enamored with this content and you want to donate to a pleb, it really helps me continue to make these types of videos. I will leave my Strike account and Lightning address on the final page you will see momentarily. Never expected, always appreciated. With all of that, let's go ahead and leave this here. As a reminder, every sat counts. And until next time, I'll see you then.